Hello everybody and welcome back to another video, and if you're here for the very first time, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. I'm Jane and my husband Mike is behind the camera. We're British, early retirees, we have no debt, we've paid off the mortgage and we live a thrifty, frugal and money-saving life here in Brittany in northwest France. And every Wednesday we invite you into our house for a mid-week money chat. Now, this week we're going to talk about an emergency fund. Do you have one? Do you need one? What would you need one for? And more importantly, the steps you can take to have one, to grow one, and to keep building on it. So what's an emergency fund? An emergency fund is the amount of money that you decide as an individual, as a couple, as a family, is the right amount of money for you as individuals to save and put away and not to touch for anything except emergencies. And you decide on that amount of money. It could be a month's living expenses. It could be 1,000 euros, dollars or pounds. It could be 3 months, 6 months or a year's living costs. You decide. But whatever that amount of money is, I'm going to share with you today that it's something once you've got it, you need to build upon it. Because we're going to talk about today all those things that could be an emergency that normally most people, because we know they don't have savings, would resort to credit in one way or another to finance that. And I think there are ways that you can offset that credit, or you can make that credit situation not so bad, or you can just mitigate it in one way or another, or have enough money to get you out of a sticky situation. So let's talk about those maybes, and they do happen, those very sticky situations. Talk now about those things that we need to put right in our lives occasionally, and the big one for all of us is transport. It can happen to any of us, can't it? We can be minding our own business, we can be a safe and careful driver, and something can happen where we end up in a car accident and our car is damaged beyond economic repair and it is written off. Most insurances will give you the value of the car that's there. So if your car is worth £5,000, euros or dollars, that's what they'll give you. And could you go out and buy a car as good as the one you were driving for that amount of money? That's the first thing. Do you have insurance that covers that? So that's kind of an emergency fund. But is everything covered in that? Because most insurances are not. Will they give you a courtesy car until you can get a new one? Is that in your insurance? Do you have the money? If not, because to have all those added on extras for us are just too expensive. So would we need money? Yes, we would. We'd need to hire a car until we got a car because we're a one-car family. Would we need to pay anything up front with our insurance? Yes, we would. We would need to pay for something. Are we covered entirely? No, we've got what's called an excess, and it's a certain amount on the bill. So do you have the money set aside that if something went wrong, terribly wrong with your car, that you could either have it repaired, or could you replace it, or could you meet the insurance needs, the percentage that you have to pay? There's something that you need an emergency fund for, because in a modern world we all need transport. The next one we all absolutely need to be prepared for is either drop in income, loss of income, or loss of job. And loss of income, we all know at the moment, is coming from increases in prices. So your income isn't as great as it once was. And it would be tempting at this moment in time to not put money aside, to not save money and not put money into an emergency fund. But it is exactly what we need. I'm going to give you an example. Our water is heated in a 300 litre tank. and it is heated overnight. And we went away for a week and we've come back and it is leaking everywhere. The tank has failed. The only thing to do with it is to replace it. And it's not a DIY job, it's hardwired into the electrical system for one, and the plumbing needs to be spot on, it needs to be professionally done. And the quote to get that done, that we have to have done, that we just have to do it, is €1,500. Could you replace your heating system? Could you replace your hot water system? Could you fix something major in your house? If your washing machine broke tomorrow, do you have the money to go out and buy a new washing machine? Of course, you could always get a second-hand one in the meantime until you're saving up. You could then, get another second-hand one in a year's time. You could do it that way. But do you have the money to pay for a major breakdown in your house if you need it? Another emergency that we all need to be prepared for is if we have pets. I saw in a Frugal forum, a Frugal discussion group on Facebook, where a person didn't have the money for pet care and their pet was at end of life and they needed that pet to be put down so it didn't suffer, and they didn't have the money. And I would be mortified if I was in that position. And it's not to be sniffed at. If you've got pets, they are your little four-legged family members and you need to have that money put aside for that. Often pet insurance does not cover having the pet put to sleep. I was really surprised about that, and it can cost a lot of money. A family member recently had a cat put to sleep, and it was £350 for the cat to be put to sleep and the cat's disposal of the body, of the remains. So that's a lot of money if you don't have a pet emergency fund. So I would say to all of you who've got pets, it's something you really should have a savings fund for or an emergency fund for, because I was surprised to find out that not everything is covered in your pet insurance. We don't have pet insurance. We have a fund of money that we save on a regular basis for our two little dogs, because like I said, they are our four-legged family members, our little friends. And if they get sick or if they needed end-of-life care, we want to make sure that we are prepared for that. But it's something we really need to put into an emergency fund. Now let's look at health emergencies and things that you might need to pay for. I'm British, I come from somewhere there is a really good healthcare system of the NHS, but it is underfunded and under strain, and not in every area of the country can you get the medical help you need when you need it. So if you needed to, and you lived in a country where you have to pay for healthcare, would you have the money set aside to pay for something? Because your insurance doesn't cover everything. We have low medical costs here in France, but we still have some upfront medical costs. I have to pay €25 to go to the doctor. I have to pay about €38 to go to the dentist. I have to pay to get my eyes checked. And then I get the money back afterwards. But I do need that money saved. I do need a small emergency fund for medical issues. Do you live where you have to pay for your drugs? You have to pay for your medications. Do you have a fund of money put aside for those in case you need them? Because that can be an emergency. If you need to get better and soon as possible and get back to work so you don't lose money in your income, having that money for your medical treatment and to pay for your prescriptions is really, really important. So those were just a few reasons of why we all need an emergency fund. And like I said at the beginning, it's up to you to decide how much, and it's important for you to decide as well of what you're going to need it for. So you need it for financial protection, you need it for peace of mind, and you need it to stay out of debt. And all of that sounds just so easy, doesn't it? So let's talk about ways and means of building that emergency fund. Number 1, define your goal. How much do you want to have in your emergency fund? What do you want your emergency fund to do? And how long do you want to take to save up for that emergency fund? So those are the first ones, defining your goals. It's really, really good advice to have at least $1,000, euros or pounds in an emergency fund. And we know in the real world that that's not realistically enough. And yet we also know in the real world that that's a massive amount of money to save for. But it's a really, really good place to start. If that's your goal, set your goal. Is your goal a month's living expenses? Is your goal 3 months? Like I said at the beginning of the video, it is your decision. But whatever you do, define your goal. Number 2, establish a budget. If you've not got a budget, this is the time to start one. And number 1, the line on your budget is always savings. And that's where you decide as well, when you've worked out your budget of money coming in and money going out, how much you are going to put into savings. As a couple, our minimum savings each month are 10%. So if our income that month is 2,000 euros, our savings that month, the minimum of that is 200 euros. Yours might be more than that, yours might be less than that. But in your budget, decide and define how much you want to save each month to reach that emergency fund total. Number 3, once you have defined your goals and once you have sorted out your budget and you've got your line on your budget which is going to say savings, the third thing you really need, which is so important, is a dedicated bank account for your emergency fund. Now we have a current account and we have savings accounts off that current account that do not cost us any more money. If you could do that, that would be a good thing to have. You need that emergency fund to gain some interest, but you also need that emergency fund to be accessible. It's not something you need to give notice for. It's not something you need to go into the bank and talk to them about getting the money out. You need that money in the next 5 minutes if you need it. So there you go. Get yourself a dedicated bank account that's just for your emergency fund. Number 4 is to do one of two things. Either automate your savings, and you can do that with a regular amount of money if you have a regular job where you get paid the same amount of money every month. Or if you're like us and you're self-employed and you have a variable income, it is something you need to do at a set date point. And our set date point of moving money is always the first day of the month. That is our moving money budget day. And on that day, we move our money into our long-term savings, we move money into our sinking funds, we move money into our long-term car savings. But if we didn't have an emergency fund already built up, that would be the day that we weren't doing those 3 things. What we were doing on that day would be moving money on that set day into our emergency fund. So, number 4, you need to either automate your savings or have a dedicated move the money day. And like us, it could be the first of the month. And number 5 is to stay disciplined. And there are some hints and tricks and strategies that you can use to stay disciplined. And one is having regular budget meetings. If you live on your own, that's with yourself. That means going over your budget, sitting there with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and checking through your budget book, tracking your spending, tracking your bills as they go out of your account, and checking your savings as they grow. Staying focused and disciplined could also mean you might stay silent about this and you just keep it to yourself, or you can be open about this and you can be loud budgeting, couldn't you? And say, well, no thanks, I'm not going to go to the bar this Friday night with everybody because I'm saving up for this, but I will go on payday, but I won't go every week from now onwards. So staying self-disciplined, staying focused until you have built that emergency fund, like I said at the very beginning of this video, to the amount of money that you feel safe and happy with. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'm really interested in your point of view on this. You don't have to tell me whether you have an emergency fund. You can be completely hypothetical about this and just chat backwards and forwards. And what I love is as well in the comments that you talk with each other in here. How much in a modern world do you think people need to have an emergency fund? What kind of things do people need to have an emergency fund for? If you're in the UK, I think you definitely need an emergency fund for a dentist, because dentists are not easy to pay for. They can be quite expensive and they're not covered by the NHS. Not very much, and not everywhere, and not universally across the country. So let me know. Do you have an emergency fund for your teeth? Do you have an emergency fund for your pets? Do you have an emergency fund at all? If you want to share that, of course. And if not, do you think you could build an emergency fund? And do you think people should have one? Is this the kind of world where we can live in now, where it's okay to not have one? Would it be a bit difficult if you didn't have one? Let me know. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for hitting the like button. It really does help. And if you've not, go on, hit the like button. If you like thrifty money saving videos and you're not a subscriber, because I know half of you watching are not, hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell so you don't miss our videos, because we put out 3 a week. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.